The rain of plasma bolts turned the sky into a kaleidoscope of burning debris and shrapnel. Sergeant Jack Callahan moved with practiced precision, his boots pounding against the war-torn soil of Varkesh 4. His rifle was hot in his hands, smoke curling from the barrel as he emptied another burst into the advancing enemy. The Zhurzen moved like a tide, their insectoid frames glistening under the flickering light of orbital bombardments. The evacuation was supposed to be routine, one final push to extract all remaining forces before the sector was deemed unsalvageable. But nothing ever went as planned in war. Callahan's squad had been cut off, trapped in the shattered ruins of what had once been a colonial outpost. The only thing standing between them and extraction was a wall of Zhurzen warriors, their jagged armor reflecting the glow of plasma fire. Callahan were getting boxed in. Private Darnell shouted, reloading with a snap of his rifle's action. Callahan already knew. His HUD painted a grim picture, friendly units thinning out, enemy forces swarming from multiple vectors. He switched to command frequency. "This is Sergeant Callahan, 27th Expeditionary. We need immediate air support at Grid Point Lima 7. We're getting torn to shreds down here." The comms crackled. A garbled reply came through, punctuated by the sounds of distant explosions. Negative, ground team. Fleets under heavy resistance. Shuttles are grounded until we clear orbital space. Callahan cursed under his breath. He ducked as a plasma round sizzled past, scorching a deep gouge into the crumbling concrete beside him. There was no way they'd hold this position. Fall back to the corridor. Now. His men responded instantly, moving with trained discipline. They dashed through the ruins, using the wreckage for cover, firing in controlled bursts to slow the enemy. Callahan was the last to move, suppressing fire, keeping the Zhurzen at bay. Then he turned and ran, heart pounding. The corridor was a narrow alley between two collapsed buildings, funneled enough that the enemy would have to come at them in smaller numbers. As his squad regrouped, Darnell stumbled, a glowing wound seared across his back. Callahan lunged forward, catching the man before he collapsed. "I got you," Callahan grunted, pulling Darnell against the wall. The private's breathing was ragged. "Ain't looking good, Sarge." Callahan ignored that. "You're gonna be fine." He tore open a med patch and slapped it over the wound, the biogel hissing as it sealed the burn. Darnell exhaled sharply. Corporal Mendez, the squad's designated marksman, tapped his helmet. "We've got more incoming, at least a full platoon." His voice was tight. Callahan clenched his jaw. They were out of time. An explosion rocked the ground, throwing dust and rubble into the air. The squad staggered, and from the haze emerged the towering figure of a Zhurzen juggernaut, a heavily armored brute wielding a plasma cannon. It fired. The shot struck near Callahan, sending him flying. His vision blurred, ears ringing. He hit the ground hard, pain flaring through his side. Darnell was dead. So was Mendez. He struggled to rise, but his limbs felt uncooperative. His HUD was flickering with warnings. A shadow loomed over him. Callahan's focus snapped back as a Zhurzen warrior, its mandibles clicking in an unsettling rhythm, grabbed him by the chest plate and hauled him up. His hands moved toward his sidearm, but another warrior wrenched his arm back. Restraints clamped onto his wrists, a sharp, electrical current locking his muscles. They weren't killing him. That realization hit harder than the plasma blast. The Zhurzen never took prisoners. But now they had one. As the remaining squad members desperately fought and fell, Callahan was dragged toward a hovering transport craft, his vision swimming. He gritted his teeth, his breath coming in sharp bursts. He didn't know why they wanted him alive. But he did know one thing. His people would come for him. And God help the bastards who took him. The war room aboard the U.S. Titan was filled with a tense, smoldering silence. Tactical displays flickered, casting pale blue light over the gathered officers. The air smelled of burnt ozone and recycled metal, hallmarks of a warship always on the move. Captain Daniel Hayes stood at the head of the holodeble, arms folded, expression grim. His gaze was fixed on the grainy footage looping before them, a live transmission intercepted from Zhurzen channels. It showed a single human, bound and bloodied, dragged through the corridors of an alien dreadnought. Sergeant Jack Callahan. Hayes exhaled slowly through his nose. "We have confirmation?" Admiral Grant Turner, a mountain of a man with steel-gray hair and a voice like thunder, nodded. "It's him." His jaw clenched. They took Callahan alive. That single fact defied all logic. The Zhurzen were brutal, efficient killers. They never took prisoners. They had no concept of mercy or ransom, no reason to waste resources keeping an enemy combatant breathing. And yet, their Callahan was shackled in alien restraints, beaten but not broken. Turner's fingers drummed against the table. They have no idea what they've just done. No one in the room needed elaboration. The unspoken law of the Terran armed forces hung over them like a storm cloud. No man left behind. It wasn't just a creed, it was an ironclad promise. Hayes straightened. Where's he being held? Commander Lutz, their intelligence officer, tapped a control panel, and a holographic projection materialized. A star map with a blinking red marker. They've taken him aboard the Korzith, a Zhurzen dreadnought currently in geosynchronous orbit over Zenthra Prime. His expression darkened. It's their home territory. Murmurs rippled through the room. Infiltrating a Zhurzen-controlled sector was madness. Hayes saw it on their faces. Even battle-hardened veterans flinched at the idea of striking the heart of the enemy's domain. Hayes didn't flinch. What kind of resistance are we looking at? Lutz swiped through the data. The Korzith is heavily armed, state-of-the-art shielding, multiple escort vessels and planetary defense batteries. He paused. Even if we managed to breach its defenses, the sheer number of Zhurzen on board would make exfiltration damn near impossible, Turner finished. He studied the hologram, then looked at Hayes. Which means we don't go in quiet. Hayes already knew where this was headed. The Admiral wasn't just suggesting a strike team insertion. He was preparing for war. Turner turned to the table of officers. We are not sneaking in. We are not negotiating. We are sending the clearest message possible. His voice hardened. We are going to burn that ship to the ground. The officers straightened at that, shoulders squaring. The doubt in their eyes turned to something colder. More resolute. Hayes nodded once. We'll need a full fleet movement. We go in fast, hit hard and leave nothing standing. Turner's lips pressed into a thin line. You'll take Strike Team Omega. Your job is to retrieve Callahan. Mine is to make sure nothing in that system is left operational once you're out. That was all the confirmation Hayes needed. He turned on his heel and strode from the war room, his mind already racing ahead. His team was waiting in the armory. As he stepped inside, the men stopped their last-minute weapon checks and looked up. No one spoke. They were all veterans. They had all served with Callahan at some point. They didn't need an inspirational speech to know what was coming. Hayes pulled on his combat vest and strapped his sidearm into place. You all know the drill, he said, voice even. We drop in hot. We get our man. We get the hell out. He met their eyes. No mistakes. No hesitation. Master Sergeant Bishop, his second-in-command, cracked his knuckles. Hell of a plan. Hayes smirked. Always is. The Titan roared through slip space, leading a fleet of warships into the abyss. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and heading straight for the belly of the beast. But that didn't matter. Because the Zhurzen had made one fatal mistake. They took one of theirs. And humanity would tear the stars apart to bring him home. The air inside the drop pod was thick with tension and the smell of gun oil. Captain Daniel Hayes gripped the restraints across his chest as the countdown ticked toward zero. Around him, his men were silent, their helmets locked in place, visors glowing faintly in the dim red light. Outside, the fleet was already engaged, human warships carving into the Zhurzen defensive line like blades through flesh. Every second counted. The pod jolted violently as it detached from the Titan, hurling them toward the dreadnought below. The interior shook with turbulence, metal groaning under the strain of entry. Hayes barely heard the rapid chatter of the fleet over comms, enemy ships breaking formation, planetary defenses lighting up, the first casualties being marked. None of it mattered right now. What mattered was that Callahan was down there and they were getting him back. The pod slammed into the Korzith's hull with a bone-rattling impact. Explosive charges detonated, breaching the thick armor, and Hayes unbuckled in a single motion. The ramp dropped and Strike Team Omega surged forward, rifles raised, moving with mechanical precision into the alien warship. Inside, alarms howled. The walls pulsed with sickly green light, a living, breathing thing responding to the invasion. The first wave of Zhurzen warriors rushed into the corridor, weapons spitting blue plasma. Hayes dropped to a knee and fired. His rifle's concussive burst tore through chitinous armor, sending one of the creatures sprawling. Push forward, he barked. The team advanced, cutting through the enemy with brutal efficiency. They were faster, better trained. The Zhurzen fought like beasts, feral, relentless, but humans fought with purpose. Hayes moved ahead, flanked by Bishop and two others. He checked his HUD, tracking Callahan's transponder. They had located his signal before launch, but it was shifting now, deeper into the ship. They're moving him, Bishop muttered. Hayes gritted his teeth. The Jurzen had figured it out. They knew humanity wasn't leaving without their man. He switched comm channels. "Fleet, this is Strike 1. We have movement on the package. We need external pressure to keep them from slipping away." Admiral Turner's voice was ice cold. "Copy, Strike 1. Redirecting bombardment. You have 5 minutes before we punch a hole through that ship." No further incentive was needed. Hayes signaled his team forward, carving a bloody path toward the lower levels. A reinforced blast door slammed shut ahead of them. Hayes barely slowed, dropping to one knee as Bishop set charges. The moment the breach blew, they stormed inside. Beyond the door, the room was stark. No alien machinery, no control consoles, just a holding cell. And in the center, shackled to the floor, was Sergeant Jack Callahan. His uniform was torn, his face swollen and bruised, but his eyes lifted at the sound of boots pounding against the floor. A slow grin spread across his bloodied lips. "About damn time." Hayes wasted no words. He moved straight to the restraints, yanking them free. "Can you walk?" Callahan rolled his shoulders, wincing. "Hell, I can fight." A low, guttural voice rumbled from the corridor beyond. Hayes turned, rifle snapping up. A towering Jurzen, armor gleaming with an eerie, bioelectric glow, stepped into view. Unlike the others, this one did not charge blindly. It studied them with cold, calculating intelligence. "Humans?" the creature rasped. "Fools." It moved with inhuman speed, a blur of claws and hardened plates. Hayes fired, but the thing was too fast, dodging the first volley. The second found its mark, rounds slamming into its side, but it barely staggered. Bishop stepped in, unloading a shotgun blast point blank into its torso. The Jurzen staggered but did not fall. It lashed out, claws ripping through armor, sending Bishop crashing into the wall. Callahan was already moving. He lunged, grabbing a fallen combat knife, and drove it between the creature's mandibles. The alien shrieked, twisting violently, before Hayes finished it with a precise shot through its skull. The body collapsed, twitching. Callahan wiped the blood from his face and turned back to Hayes. "Evac." Hayes checked his chrono. 2 minutes. The alarms had changed now, no longer signaling an intrusion, but a greater emergency. The Titan was making good on its promise. The ship was coming down, piece by piece. They sprinted for the extraction point, cutting through the last of the resistance. The hangar loomed ahead, and outside, the black void of space rippled with streaks of fire as the battle raged on. A gunship hovered just beyond the force field, side cannons spitting hellfire into the charging Jurzen. Bishop was on his feet, bleeding but moving. Callahan helped him forward as Hayes covered their retreat. They leaped onto the gunship, barely making it inside as the pilot pulled away. Behind them, the Korzith shuddered, its structure failing under the relentless assault. Callahan exhaled, slumping against the wall, exhausted but alive. Hayes gave him a look. "Took you long enough to get captured." Callahan grinned. "Yeah, well, figured I'd give you guys something to do." Hayes just shook his head, turning his gaze toward the burning wreckage below. It wasn't over yet. Not until the last ship in that system was dust. The gunship rattled as it tore through the battlefield, weaving between burning wreckage and bursts of plasma fire. Captain Daniel Hayes braced against the cabin wall, rifle still clutched in his hands, his heartbeat a steady drum inside his ears. Across from him, Sergeant Jack Callahan sat slumped, breath coming in measured but shallow bursts. Blood matted his hair, his uniform was a torn mess, but his eyes were steady, sharp as ever. "Status?" Hayes barked at the pilot. "Bad," came the clipped reply. "Fleet still engaged, but the Jurzen are throwing everything they've got at us. No clear path to the Titan yet." Hayes cursed under his breath. The battle outside was chaos. Human and Jurzen warships clashed in the void, weapons flaring like miniature supernovas. Debris drifted in slow arcs, the shattered remains of fighters and capital ships alike. The Korzith, the alien dreadnought they had just escaped, was now little more than a flaming husk, listing as internal detonations ripped it apart. The Admiral had been true to his word. Callahan shifted in his seat, wincing. "So what's the plan?" Hayes checked his HUD, scanning for a viable route. "We punch through the worst of it, get back to the fleet and get the hell out of here." Callahan snorted, flexing his fingers. "Sounds easy." The moment the words left his mouth, the gunship rocked violently, sirens wailing as a pulse of blue energy slammed into the hull. Hayes barely caught himself before being thrown sideways. A crackling voice cut through the static. "We lost stabilizers. We're losing altitude." Hayes pushed forward, grabbing onto the co-pilot's seat. Below them, the battle-scarred surface of Zenthra Prime loomed, cities sprawling across the land like a tangled web of alien architecture. If they crashed here, the mission was over. Redirect power to thrusters, level us out. Trying, but another hit. This time it sent them into a spiral. The horizon twisted, sky and ground flipping in a nauseating blur. Hayes barely heard the shouted curses, barely registered the impact warning screaming across his visor. Then came the crash. The gunship hit hard, skidding across metal and stone, sparks flying in every direction. The impact threw Hayes forward, and the world became a jumbled mess of smoke, fire, and the deafening screech of metal tearing itself apart. For a moment there was only darkness. Then pain. Hayes groaned, forcing himself upright. His helmet's visor was cracked, his body ached from the crash, but he was alive. A quick glance confirmed the others were moving. Bishop was coughing, pulling himself free of the wreckage. Callahan, bruised but unbroken, was already on his feet. The bad news came fast. We've got movement. Hayes turned sharply. Figures emerged from the smoke, sleek and lethal. The Jurzen had been waiting. Defensive positions. There was no time to think. The enemy descended on them like a wave, plasma bolts streaking through the air. Hayes dropped behind a section of torn hull plating, returning fire. Callahan was already in the fight, his stolen Jurzen sidearm barking with alien energy as he took down a charging warrior. Bishop, bleeding from a cut above his eye, slammed a fresh mag into his rifle. This just keeps getting better. Hayes scanned the battlefield, mind racing. They couldn't hold this position. The fleet was still above, still fighting, but they wouldn't last forever. They needed to move. He switched to comms. Fleet, this is Strike 1. We are down planetside. We need immediate static. Hayes clenched his jaw. Jamming signals. Of course. The Jurzen weren't letting them go without a fight. More of the enemy poured in. Hayes gunned one down, then another. A towering brute charged forward, its plasma blade humming with lethal intent. Callahan met it head-on, sidestepping at the last second, driving his combat knife up into the gap beneath its jaw. The alien gurgled and collapsed. Hayes turned to Bishop. We need an exit. Working on it. Bishop was already scanning the wreckage, looking for something, anything they could use. His eyes locked onto a half-buried distress beacon among the remains of their ship. I can boost a signal through that wreckage, get the fleet to pinpoint us. Do it, Hayes ordered. Bishop sprinted for the beacon, plasma fire slamming into the metal around him. Callahan and Hayes covered him, dropping enemy after enemy. The ground trembled beneath them. A deep, guttural sound reverberated through the battlefield. Then from the darkness something massive stepped into view. A Jurzen warlord. It was easily 10 feet tall, its exoskeleton reinforced with heavy plating. 4 arms, each one ending in a wicked, serrated blade. Its glowing, predatory eyes locked onto Hayes, and it let out a guttural snarl that shook the air. Of course, Callahan muttered, rolling his shoulders. Wouldn't be a proper extraction without a boss fight. The warlord moved fast, faster than something that size had any right to. Hayes barely had time to react before it was on him, one blade slashing for his head. He ducked, rolling aside, feeling the heat of the strike pass inches from his skull. Callahan flanked left, firing a full burst into the creature's side. The rounds barely dented its armor. Bishop's voice crackled in Hayes' ear. Signals up. Fleet's got our position. The warlord swung. Hayes dodged again, barely avoiding being bisected. He needed an opening. Callahan provided one. The sergeant feinted, drawing the creature's attention, then lunged low, driving his knife between its armored plates. The beast roared, twisting in pain, and that was all Hayes needed. He raised his rifle, aiming for the exposed gap in the warlord's throat, and fired. A single, precise shot. The warlord staggered. Its eyes flickered. Then, with a heavy, shuddering collapse, it fell. The battlefield was silent. Then the sky split open. Orbital fire rained down, bright lances of energy ripping through the enemy ranks. The Titan had arrived. Dropships descended, engines screaming as reinforcements poured out, cutting down the remaining Jurzen. A gunship touched down near Hayes and the others, side doors sliding open. Time to go. Callahan didn't need to be told twice. He hauled himself aboard, followed by Bishop. Hayes was the last to step in, casting one final glance at the ruined battlefield. Then the doors shut and they were airborne. As the gunship climbed, Hayes finally let himself breathe. Callahan smirked. Told you I could fight. Hayes chuckled, shaking his head. Yeah, you did all right. Below them, Zenthra Prime burned. The battle was over. And humanity had made its message clear. No Man Left Behind.